Broadcast is live. Well, good afternoon. It's Joe Wainz and Pat Meehan doing another episode of The Power of Productivity. We're focused today on balanced scorecards, and I've invited Pat to talk about that. Pat is a business coach from TEC Resource Center, and one of the things that he likes to focus on is balanced scorecards or scorecards. So we've got sort of lessons learned that he has discovered when dealing with his clients and what they don't understand or the mistakes they make around scorecards, and some of the remedies that he has and suggestions and insights that he has, and a couple things that you can take away and try yourself. So welcome, Pat.
Oh, thanks, Joe. Nice to be here.
Yeah. So you engage with a client, or maybe you're out somewhere and you're talking with someone who is in a position of business ownership or C-suite executive, and the idea of scorecards comes along, or business strategy really, and you ask them, what are you focused on in your business strategy? What areas of the business? And I'm wondering what kind of questions you get, or what kind of answers you get from those people, and what are the mistakes that they're making, what are the insights that you have around business strategy and where to focus on.
No, that's a great question, Joe. So you probably get as many different answers as you do people, but I would say primarily business owners tend to look in the rearview mirror versus looking through the windshield. And by that, I mean they're focused on financials and gross profits and net profits and revenues, and they don't spend enough time in the front end of the business talking about customer acquisition, where we get our leads from, how those leads convert, how many transactions per customer we're doing, what customer satisfaction looks like, what their average price per sale. These are the things that really drive the business. So there's really just a few areas that I recommend to anybody that they should stay focused on, and that's really lead generation, conversion of leads. It's sort of that sales funnel as things flow down, and then once you have the customer, sort of retaining them in the transaction history that you do with them. How often do they come back? How many transactions can the company undertake with that same client in a year, 2 years, or the lifelong span of the customer? And then we move over into sort of the financials as to how do we get a higher price for the value we offer our customer, and profits and such. So to answer the question succinctly, I really get the answer most times. Well, yeah, we focus on gross profit, and we focus on, we get our P&L every month, and we look at that from a scorecard standpoint. But that really doesn't monitor the fundamentals of the business, really, when you think about it.
No, that's, as you said, looking through the rearview mirror, or I call them lagging indicators. What I'm hearing is you really prefer that they focus on the marketing and sales aspect of the business, which is something that they have to be proactive about, something they can actually control the outcome of. How many phone calls do I make? How many times do I reach out to a client? How many ads am I running? What are the results of those ads? That's stuff that they have control over. And then the financials, I won't say they work themselves out, but you got to have money, you got to have revenue and
Sure.
and profit or lack of profit before you can evaluate it. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I can tell you 9 times out of 10, a customer starts with, from a marketing perspective, is I just spend too much money on marketing and don't get any results.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really because they're focused on the wrong things. If you're counting the number of leads you get in, you should be looking at messaging, right? Is my messaging correct? Am I connecting with the customer? Am I entering the conversation with the customer with the question they already have in their mind, right? And you'll see, if you really focus on that a little bit and monitor it with a scorecard to say, look, we put this Facebook ad out, or we put this LinkedIn ad out, and we got sort of mediocre results, and maybe we should tweak the message a little bit. And miraculously, when you find the right message, when you enter the customer's headspace with the question they're already thinking about, the problem they have that they don't want, or the solution they want that they don't have, your numbers take off. Your conversions are higher, your number of leads per month are higher, and things work. So that executive should never be looking at his marketing budget and saying, hey, it's just not working. I'm spending too much money for the result I'm getting. There's great ways to sort of set that up on a scorecard and measure it.
Hmm. Perfect. So we've talked a little bit about strategy. We've talked a little bit about focus, and a lot of it is in the marketing and sales area. Um, you know, what are the expectations that you find that clients have, and wrong expectations maybe from the strategy that they put in place? And what kind of correction can you make with them so that their expectations are set in the right direction? And maybe you've touched on it a little bit with the fact that you got to get the messaging right, and then your numbers take off. But are there other areas that you encounter problems with their expectations and strategy?
Sure. I think what happens often is people start their business, they write a business plan that sort of tells them how things are supposed to flow. For service business, for example, how many service calls a day should my service engineer be doing, and what kind of revenue should that generate for the company? And they put their Excel spreadsheet together and say, hey, these are the mechanics by the way the system works today. What happens is over time, the environment that you're selling to changes, and the company itself changes, and where their focus is, and who their customer is, and those things change. So I always I always ask the owner, hey, do you look at a business plan? Do you have a go forward forecast, like from a business plan that we can look at and monitor for this year or the next 3 years? And often, more often than I'd like, they'll say to me, hey, we used to do that. We did that when we started, but we don't do that anymore. We just sort of move forward. So they're missing the really the importance of looking back at that business and saying what's changed, looking at the market and saying, what's different today than it was when we started, and should we be doing something about that?
Hmm.
So it's the old saying, right? Working on the business, not in the business. Business is tough. I ran a business for a lot of years myself successfully, and I would be caught up in the day to day and forget about the strategy and working on the company and where we were moving to.
So what
So
I'm hearing is their expectations is the strategy is going to take care of itself. The business is going to take care of itself. I'm just going to keep grinding,
right,
which is erroneous.
I already
And
did that. Right,
really, they need to continue developing that plan. And I know for myself, the advantage of having a coach is the accountability piece. Somebody who can hold their feet to the fire every so often and say, "Hey, how you doing on this goal? How you doing on this metric?"
right.
And and when you're paying money to someone to keep you accountable, that it puts more skin in the game, if you will, for you to actually do what you said you're going to do. So, yeah, business doesn't take care of itself if you just grind, for
The
sure.
world is so different today than it was 5 years ago, even 2 years ago. I mean, you have the pandemic, and the economy has changed. Inflation is running out of control. So many things change every day that you've got to. If you were driving a car and you had your directions and your GPS is constantly looking at where the traffic is, where the congestion is, what the best route to get there is, right?
Hmm.
Very similar for a business. You should be looking at that constantly because things change. If you're in a service business again, or a transportation business, fuel costs just gone through the roof. What are we going to do about it? How are we addressing that? And often, the CFO will come to the P&L meeting and say, hey, you know what, our costs have really gone up, and we got to do something about it. But you really have to be looking at that more proactively than once a month, once a quarter, whenever you meet for a financial meeting.
I was just thinking to ask. I look at mine weekly. What do you recommend as far as looking at your scorecard, keeping it up?
Yeah, I set my clients up with a daily dashboard that they look at. Usually
Hmm.
it's not very busy. It's the key indicators, the key performance indicators that they should be looking at on a daily basis. And then there are monthly and quarterly sort of things that they should look at. But if every morning when you click on your computer in the morning, or your cell phone, or whatever world you live in these days, right? It it is just red, green, yellow indicators that sort of say, hey, the green you smile at and move on, right?
Hmm.
The yellow, you think maybe we should be doing something about that. And the red, you make a phone call and set up a meeting with somebody who has the responsibility in that area, or yourself for that matter, and take some action to say, look,
Right.
what's happening there.
So I would be remiss if I don't say something at this point about solutions or systems like Power BI. If you have to do a scorecard every day, then there are tools out there, folks, that you can use to automate that process. So you don't have to go to Google Analytics and download your stuff and put it in Excel and fiddle with it. Like that can happen at a click of a button. Once you set it up, it's done. So, and that really
Absolutely.
leads me into my next question. How are customers tracking customer traction, conversion, retention? What are the mistakes that they're making when they're doing that, or not tracking the right things, or just the holes in their thought process? And what is it that you recommend for tracking?
So, a lot of the information, as you just mentioned, comes from your Google Analytics, right? It depends on where your lead gen comes from. If your lead gen comes from a website, well, Google Analytics is a gold mine for you, right? We can look at how many people are we driving to the site, and tie that back to the ad campaigns that we have out there, or the email drip marketing that we're doing. Or if you're getting it from a telemarketing group, then there's usually some sort of a telemarketing software they use to say how many phone calls did I make, and how many times am I getting the customer to agree to a meeting, or whatever, an order, or whatever, however your process works. But you need to be monitoring and tweaking that continuously. So if your expectation is that if I spend $2,000 a month on ad campaigns, how many customers do I want to have come to the website? Of those customers, what percentage of them do I want to convert over to some sort of action, whether it be a download of a free ebook, or some data mining sort of offer that you put out there, or in fact, how many push the button and place an order? Because there's a thing called a buyer's journey, right? If you think about it, there are transactional buyers who go out there and buy today because they're looking for gas, or a bottle of milk, or whatever the case may be, or they're looking for a t-shirt, or something, and they go to a website and it's a 2-for-1 sale and they'll buy it. Most times the studies show that 97% of the people who come to your website or come to your lead gen portal aren't ready to buy. They're on an information seeking process. So I always say that there needs to be an interruption, which is sort of, hey, stating the problem that the customer is thinking about, an engagement subheader that says, hey, here's the solution. And then there needs to be some information and an offer that allows them to attach to you as someone in the industry they want to continue to listen to, and look to for the answers that when they're ready to buy, they'll buy. So we typically set it up in that sort of funnel type approach. How many people come to our lead portal, wherever that is? How many people convert? And then how many people take the offer to allow us to continue to have a conversation with them till they're ready to buy?
All right. Um, are people monitoring other performance, revenue generating performance criteria? And, if not, what do you recommend? If so, what are you finding? And are they having success in that?
Yeah, it really depends on the customer, right? So if you're a labor force intensive, we need to be monitoring the labor force because they're a large part of our cost of goods, right? So if I have service engineers, for example, and their productivity is very low, then you're not going to be very profitable because your labor cost is higher than it should be. So we want to monitor things like productivity. In a manufacturing world, it's turn time on inventory, it's um, process speed, time to unit completion. Um, you know, there are those sections, as I said, in the P&L, which are very important, right? So you've got your revenue, which is, everybody wants to look to revenue as it's an instant fix, but lots of times it's not. Um, there's that gross profit, which is really a result of your cost of goods. What does my freight cost look like? What does my utilization of manpower look like? What do my part costs look like? Should I be monitoring vendor contracts because my part costs are creeping up? Absolutely, yes. These are the things, because my gross profit in my model I want to be above 45%, between 45 and 52, or whatever your model dictates, because everybody's is a little different. But if you're not monitoring the things that go into the cost of goods, your gross profit can fall off pretty dramatically, and your overhead will eat up all the profit there is in the business. So, these are very important things operationally to be looking at that really impact your sale price, right? If I have low utilization of manpower, I've got to sell, my hourly rate needs to be much higher than the other guy.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you're a systems guy. There are lots of systems that'll help you do this and give you the
Sure.
data. Tracking it manually is sort of
So
laborious.
revenue's misleading folks. I heard a great line a couple weeks back. Revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king. Like, what do you got in the bank at the end of the day? And I've heard stories of a pollster who had a large supermarket chain as a customer, and I'm guessing at the numbers, but they were doing maybe 3 million revenue. When they lost that large grocery supermarket chain, their revenue went down to 1 million, but their profit went up. They ended up making more money at the end of the year. So revenue really is misleading.
Oh, very much so.
And understanding the cost of goods sold is important. For me, it's fairly simple, right? I do consulting, IT. It's pretty much straight labor for me, and then I've got some overhead. But other folks, you get into shipping and you get into other things that there's material and labor, and I don't know what else goes into those equations, but they're all important, and that profit number certainly is more important. And there are tools, as you mentioned, out there to make this easier, whether it's Power BI or some other off-the-shelf tools. Certainly I've been exposed to a vast amount of those tools, and I'm sure you have as well. So
Sure.
if you've got questions, folks, just feel free to reach out to us, and we can help point you in the right direction regarding tools. All right, so we talked about revenue. What other financial performance criteria, or are there any? I think we touched on some of this, but am I missing anything from financial performance?
So yeah, financial performance, as I said, is sort of the rearview mirror, but it is the measuring stick for the strategy, right? So you're measuring those key things, sort of like gross revenue, gross profit, cost of goods, overhead, and you want to make sure that the percentages, it's a math problem, right? The finances of a company are a math problem. If I sell something for $1 and my cost of goods is 20 cents and my overhead is 80 cents, I'm not going to make any profit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously each of those areas break down into multiple components, but you want to be sure. A lot of people look at a P&L as just a document, right? I like to encourage them to look at every expense and every part of the P&L as a percentage of revenue, because at the end of the day, we want to have an expectation of what's left over for us, right? If you're not taking home any profit out of your business at the end of the day, then it's really just a job, right? You're drawing a salary, and you're not building anything of real worth that maybe you could sell, or maybe it's a legacy that you could pass on to your children. So you want to have in your mind those performance numbers, those percentages, to say whatever our revenue was, our profit was X, our GP was Y, our overhead is this percentage. And then when they start to fluctuate a little bit, and as they are today, I mean, I can tell you I'm working with many customers today that are struggling a little bit because the inflation is really sort of kicking them in the behind. So you want to say, oh, what do we do about it, right? There are solutions. You can cut expenses, you can raise prices, you can do all sorts of things. Even justifying to your customer to say, look, I had a guy the other day, believe it or not, was running a pizzeria, a local pizzeria. I have a lake house up in Connecticut, and we were on next door, and the people were complaining that his veal parmesan hero went up from $9 to $13.50 or something, and he hadn't changed the price on his menu yet. And he went into this gyration of, look, my prices have gone up, and but it's a simple solution, folks. When I jumped on Nextdoor just quickly and say, look, who's not paying more for everything, right? So you can't blame the store owner, who we love. He's a great guy, and he services the community really well. It's not his fault. It's just, hey, it's the reality of where we are today. So don't take it out on him because he needs to raise his prices a little bit. It is what it is. But your ability to talk to that problem is
Hmm.
back to how you're monitoring it, because you'll know they say, look, my cost of goods has gone up by 13%. It'll be right on the tip of your tongue because you're either looking at a scorecard or you're looking at your dashboard, or you're somebody in your financial group that's sending you a report on it. But it's those things are so vital for the business owner to know by looking at snap of a finger that, hey, that something is wrong there, and then have a good conversation with the people in the business and outside the business as to what perhaps we could do about it.
You touch on something that triggers a thought for me is I'll go into some mom and pop shops, and they haven't raised their prices in forever, and they've been successful somehow or they've made a living somehow, but they really don't respond to the fact that there is inflation. It's a reality. Every year stuff goes up a little bit, and they've never raised their prices, and they don't have a clue, and they almost feel dishonest if they were to raise their prices because of inflation. And I think they're doing a disservice to themselves. And um, and and I want to sort of contrast with folks that do look at their financials and see the fact that their cost of goods sold has gone up, and where's that coming from. And guess what, I have to pass that on to the customer. I do have to raise the price. I don't like raising the prices, but this is the reality that I have to do. And I bump into those folks that almost feel upset that you would say, hey, you really do need to raise your prices, like there's something wrong with that. And there isn't something wrong with it if it's necessary. um,
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. In fact, those are some of the people I work with. They've run a business their entire life, and now they're looking to exit. And the business doesn't have a lot of value because their bottom line net profit is too low. They've
mhm.
let the death march, I call it, sort of go on as their prices went up, their costs went up for the business, and they never raised their price. So the very first thing we do is an exercise of understanding, if I were to raise my price by X%, how many customers do you think you would lose? And they typically will ponder that and say, well, I don't know. I said, well, do you think you'll lose all of them? And it's no, we're not going to lose all of them. Whether you think you're going to lose 20% of them, well, I don't know, maybe. And when we end up doing the math with the amount they raise their price, they typically lose the customers that are not really great customers anyway. And
Mhm.
miraculously, their profit goes up because they need to sell less with the higher price to be more profitable. So it is scary, and the small business guy particularly is a little nervous about, I'm going to lose customers I've spent a
Sure.
lot of time and money getting. But at the end of the day, when you do the math on it, it's not the reality. First off, most customers buy value, not price. If you're servicing your customer, I just finished Sam Walton's book from Walmart, and
Mhm.
he speaks to this pretty well about the value that he gave his customers. The greeters that greet you when you come in, feeling welcome in the store. They're not, even though he's trying to sell at the lowest price in the Walmart environment, that's not why his customers are there. And that's not why our customers are there either, yours or mine, or some of the folks that are listening. They're there because you're supplying them with a good value. And
Mhm.
you'd be surprised if you haven't looked at your competitors' prices, you may be far below where they're actually selling it.
It's almost, well, it is interesting for me that I will walk in businesses and I will look at what they're providing and the prices they're charging, and I will think internally they need to raise their prices. And that's probably because I'm a business owner and I understand things that other people don't understand as just being a customer. But I look at it going, you really need to raise your prices and it will be okay. Like, people will be okay with that price raise. Um,
They will. They will.
KPIs. So I've been searching for an example because I bump into it where, hey, we've got to create some KPIs for measuring the business, and people come up with the oddest things that they're going to measure. And I think they come up with them because they're exciting to measure, because they'll see activity, because they'll be fun to measure, but they really have no bearing on the business, the profitability, the revenue. They don't have any bearing on actual strategy of the business. So I'm wondering if you have any examples that pop in your mind of silly things that people have thought of as KPIs. And then if you have any, we talked about some of these things, but what's the mindset you need to have when you're picking KPIs?
Yeah, that's a great one, really. People monitor all sorts of crazy things. And, I always tell them, if it doesn't have a direct impact on revenue, gross profit, overhead, or net profit, right? Does it impact any of those? And if it doesn't impact any of those, then it really doesn't matter, right? It really has very little impact on the overall business itself. Now, you get some things that you can monitor that you could say, well, maybe that does or does not, like customer satisfaction, customer feedback. A lot of people do a lot of customer feedback these days, which is a wonderful thing, because that's about getting in the head of your customer, right? Going back all the way back to, is my messaging correct? Am I asking the right questions? But you've got to ask the hard question, that does this KPI really impact the overall profitability of the company? Employee satisfaction, there's some people who monitor that. Typically that's in the HR world. It's a good thing, because what does it do? It decreases turnover, right? And turnover in a business is expensive. So, okay, that fits. But there are all sorts of crazy KPIs out there. I mean, they call them key performance indicators because they're key to the business and how the business will perform, really. If they're not key, stop wasting your time. And let's face it,
they're sightseeing. There we go. You're either looking out the windshield, you're looking out the rearview mirror, or you're sightseeing. So don't choose any KPIs for sightseeing.
That's good. I like that. That's good. That's really good. Yeah, no, it's exactly right. It's either it's front or back. That's it. That's all it really has to do with it. And, key performance, if you're not monitoring key performance indicators, then you really should start monitoring key performance indicators. Right. So, a lot of people won't do it, Joe, because they're like, oh man, it's too hard to capture the data. And I spend a week, maybe 2 weeks with them, or 3 weeks. I'm into the third week of it, and they realize if you tweak the way you put the data into the various systems that we have out there, it's available to you, and it's easily available to you. You don't need to hire on a new person to, type up a spreadsheet every month so you can get your KPIs, right? That's a no-no. You're adding overhead not for the right reason, right? Automation today, you know better than anybody, but it's, there's so much available out there for you. It's so easy to capture the data and just make it automated as much as you possibly can.
So we need to ramp up. So again, folks, if you've got questions about scorecards, or you've got questions about automating your scorecards, or anything in this area, we're certainly willing to talk to you. And,
absolutely,
be interesting to us. So if you want to get a hold of Pat, here is his contact information, and if you want to get a hold of me, there's my contact information. And Pat, if you can tell people a couple things that, walk away from here and try this, try that, what are some of the things that you strongly recommend that they walk away from here and try within their business?
Number one, without question, maybe the most important thing is to take a certain amount of time per week to focus on your business. Just not the fires, not the craziness going on, not answering complaints from customers, but thinking about, where are we in the world today? Is the environment that we're currently working in different? And is there a more strategic way for me to address that?
And schedule that, folks. I mean, what he's saying is dead on. Schedule it. Put it in your calendar every week. For me, it's Friday and sometime Wednesday morning. That's almost sacred time for me. It's like nothing else gets put there, because if I don't do this, if you don't do this, then you're busy grinding and you're not actually looking at where you're going. So yeah, absolutely. Great point. Any other ideas that you'd recommend they
get everybody else in the company on the same page, right? So you've set a strategy, you spent some time, you're now monitoring certain things. Get them to understand the impact to the business. Don't be afraid to let them in and look under the hood a little bit. If everybody's rowing in the right direction, we're going to get there first. Absolutely. If they're a little confused as to, I don't even know what that means, I'm reporting it every month, but I have no idea what it means, they can't be helpful to you. And, people are our greatest asset. If we can find the right people and give them the right tools, it's much easier to be successful.
I'm trying to think of the book and I'm not capturing it, but the idea of opening up your financials is I think what you're talking about here.
Absolutely.
And it really works. It really works. Yeah, for sure. So, wow, this has been fun, Pat.
Yeah, same here. I loved it. Had a
Fun.
great time.
I'm glad you joined us, and I hope people got something useful out of it. And we'll see you. Thanks.
All right. Take care.